Hi, hello and welcome everyone to a new video, but man do we need to talk. Nerfs happened, oh boy. The build got bonked in the head. And I mean, it didn't die, it didn't get killed from the bonk, the build survived, so for people wondering, is the build dead? No, it's not, it's very much alive and kicking, still very fast, still good damage. Technically, if you want to overdose on copium, you could say that the build is better because now we have more movement speed. But if we tone down the copium levels, the damage is worse, defense is worse, the build is still great. So what happens in this video? Let's look at what happens in the video. So I'm going to talk about upcoming changes and how they affect the build. Then I'm going to be talking about 2 building options for the build, and then a very low budget level 90 POB to finish up the video. It's not really league start friendly, but if you could get a weapon, the Fulcrum, right, that weapon, if you can get it early, technically league start viable. Like, yeah. Okay, so let's dive into the changes. Okay, so first, upcoming changes and how they affect the build. The biggest one, the most obvious one, is the Omniscience nerf, right? So Omniscience power got cut in half, and that affects the build. Definitely, we lose some damage, and we lose some resistances from Omniscience. And that ties into the next nerf, which is Melding Nerf. Melding Nerf got nerfed by... well, basically we lose 4% max res if we divine it perfectly. Divining it would be actually difficult, so divines, yep, okay. So that also kind of cuts into the value of it. And then we got a Reservation Mastery poofed. It's gone, which means that we have to invest even more to fit in melding and the max res into the build. And then Defiance banner nerfed, which means that we have a bit less armor, a bit less evasion. Recombinators are gone as well, so that means that we can no longer have Abyssal Socket Temple mod gloves. It's either one or the other, not both in one. Okay, so what 2 build options do I have here? One option to be to keep the melding, right? Do the build as it was, but worse, or drop the melding. Just say, whatever, we don't care about max res, and try to adjust the build accordingly. Let's dive into the first one first. What happens with the build, right? So we end up with an even higher budget, right? Like even higher cost, a substantial defensive loss, a huge damage nerf, and potentially, well, it depends on the setup, but potentially even less movement speed. So in the bossing setup, we go from 25 million damage to 18 million damage. In the max zoom setup, we have 17 million damage, it goes to 13 million damage, and this is the different setup that I was talking about. You could go to almost 15 million, but then you lose a jewel socket, which means you lose 30 movement speed, you lose some cast speed. Yeah, it's not very nice, but kind of worth for the damage. And then we also get the -4 max res from the Melding nerf. We go from 84 to 80. So that affects our max hit by quite a bit. We go from 56,000 elemental hit taken to 39 maximum elemental hit taken. That is a substantial nerf, right? And then overall, right, from other nerfs, we have a sizable defense nerf from less aura effect and Defiance banner nerf. And lastly, in this version, we would have to change a flask mod. We have to drop life regeneration, which equals to like around 150 life per second loss. And then we have to replace that with all resistances. And doing this with Mage Blood, right, because we're talking about the endgame setup here, this is good in a way because you don't have to care about resistances on your gear at all. But you lose a lot of life regen because this is half of our regen, right? So it hurts. It hurts. I played without it. It's fine. But yeah. So you would, basically, yeah, as I say here, you can make it work, but I can't recommend. You have to invest even more money, more headache setting it up, building it up, and you just do all of that to reach a nerfed version of it, which is still good, but it's not that good, right? So I can't recommend. Whereas the option number 2, I said here that it's better than before in a copium overdose kind of way, because, well, movement speed. Anyway, so what happens here? We go from 25 million damage to 21 million damage in the bossing setup, right? We go in the max zoom setup that I was primarily running just for mapping, boss rushing, whatever. It's 17 million damage goes to 15 million damage, right? These nerfs are not game breaking. They're not really gonna be noticeable that much. The build will feel pretty much the same in terms of damage. So we drop multiple jewels for Reservation and Melding itself, right? We drop those, and that gives us a lot of free passive points. We could spend those in very efficient ways, like cluster jewels, which can give you crit chance to deal double damage, movement speed, cast speed, all the good stuff, right? Efficient life and damage nodes as well. Life nodes are very welcome. And this results in having more crit chance scaling, which is great because you can scale your explodies better. It was never a problem, but better is better, right? Excuse me. So, right, and then those clusters that we invest our free points into also give us 13% movement speed. That is a buff, that is very nice. Also some cast speed, but almost irrelevant. Movement speed is important. Movement speed is great. Also, we get 1 or 2 gem sockets now. So one comes from not using Purity of Lightning because we're not using Melding anymore, so we don't need that. And then the other one is from Abyssal Socket, right? So we either go for Abyssal Socket on our gloves or Temple Mod. So Temple Mod gives us way more damage, but Abyssal Socket gives us some life, some damage, and then, well, potentially movement speed, and also phasing on kill. This is the important thing. This is the main thing why we would go for an Abyssal Socket. And, well, for mapping, definitely, you would drop some damage, get Abyssal Socket, and get phasing. So what can we do with those free gem sockets? Well, you could go for cast when damage is taken, for automating your Molten Shell, and that would be very nice, right? You don't have to think about it. You could also go for increased duration, which would make you safer for a longer period of time. And then another option, if you have those free sockets, is to juice up your Lightning Warp, because previously I had faster casting with my Lightning Warp, and that makes such a big difference. Oh my god, the smoothness of Lightning Warp when you have a lot of movement speed, a lot of action speed, and a lot of cast speed, whew, it's juicy. And then if you have 2 gem sockets free, you could go for Inspiration to reduce the mana cost, and you know, you can spam it more and stuff like that, because we don't really have too much mana regen. We have 97 here. It is pretty good. We have 53 unreserved mana, 35 mana cost for BV, and then Lightning Warp costs 37, right? But the cast speed is 5 times per second, so yeah, you cannot sustain that much mana. But yeah, so getting Inspiration would be nice. 30, you know, that helps a little bit. Or you could just go for... Well, faster casting is very nice. You don't have to spam your Lightning Warp. Even if you just cast it randomly, right, like occasionally, it's like way faster, way smoother. So would still recommend doing faster casting, even if you're not constantly spamming it. Right, that's about it for the gem sockets. And as for defense, of course, we also get a sizable nerf, but at least we're not wasting currency to get mediocre results, right? We don't have to get crazy jewels and sacrifice damage to get defense. What we do is we get a few efficient life nodes, and the ones that I'm talking about are right here. So this is 6%, 10%, and 10% life. You know, 3 points for 26% life is really, really good. And now since we had some free passives, this is definitely worth it. And look at my effective elemental hit, 38.7. What was it in the other version? That was, where is it? 39. So we almost get the same amount of defensive value as a melding, low investment melding. We can't really go for a high investment melding because we don't have access to other max resistances, but we replace that with 3 passive points pretty much. Because this build has very little life, right? That's why these life nodes are very efficient. Normally, if the build would already have like 6,000 life, yes, then getting max res would be probably better. But again, maybe not. I don't know. I never had 6,000 life with this build, and I don't need to, and it's fine. So yeah, technically we lose 9 max res. We go to 75 from 84, and it's fine. It hurts mostly for like endgame bossing, right? For mapping, sure, this is also gonna be Squishier, technically, well, technically not really. Well, right, it will be squishier because we go from 56 to 38. It's not going to be squishier there than the current new upcoming melding setup, right? But it would be squishier than the previous setup. So we basically take what we can, make best of what we are given. And yeah, overall, did this build get nerfed? Hell yes. But is it dead? Hell no. It's just more of a mapper, less of a bosser, which it was designed for, right? It was designed for mapping. And speaking of being good for mapping, last league, so Sentinel League, for this build was actually pretty bad. For the majority of the time, I wasn't even doing Sentinel because I was running too fast, exploding enemies too fast. I cannot apply Sentinels if everyone is already dead, right? But this league... oh, this is the league where this build will shine because you don't have to wait for enemies to spawn to benefit from the new league mechanic, right? You just run through maps quickly, get your tablets, set up the thing, go in, explode everything, get the rewards, go next. This build is going to be great for that, right? Because we have good damage, well, enough damage to kill uber bosses, so for sure. And defense, I mean, we freeze, we run fast, we have a few portals. It's fine, right? It's fine. But yeah, this version is definitely tankier than the first iteration of the build. It's squishier than the second iteration of the build, but it's like a good medium in between after the nerfs. Because after the nerfs, all versions got like way worse. So getting these results, I'm kind of okay, like, and I would be playing this. I might actually play this as my second build because it's just so good. It feels so good playing this. Anyway, that's going to be pretty much it about the changes of the build. And then let's talk about the last thing that I wanted to cover here, which is the low budget, low investment, low level setup. So what do we have here? So the weapon is the hardest thing to get, right? Because it comes from Heist. It is pretty rare. And we kind of, well, we don't need to 6-link it, actually. No, we don't. So just getting this weapon, and then you can make the build. Right, then it's technically budget friendly, league start friendly, whatever. But yeah, even if I take off, okay, so this is with a 21, whatever, Awakening KOE, we take that off. Oh, we didn't have interconnection for some reason. Right, well, right. So it's still fine, it's like 2 million damage. So how I made it work, okay, let's quickly talk about how I made it work on a low budget. So we get 3 passive clusters, low level, it doesn't have to be high level. We have 3 options, 2 jewels, and we need 2 jewels with different options out of those 3, right? So if we have Zealotry here, then we have this one with Hatred or Determination. We cannot repeat it because then we won't have enough mana. If we would go for the budget auras here, as you can see, no Enlighten, no nothing. And defense is definitely worse, but it's, you know, as a super budget option, it is good. And how do we mitigate the thing that we have to mitigate? The important thing for this build is to mitigate Ignite. And the way we mitigate Ignite in our normal build is we get elevated boots. Getting elevated boots or any elevated mod early on is not budget, right? It's not league start friendly, it's not budget friendly for sure. But look at my boots, they don't have that. So how do I fix the Ignite problem? Well, we have this little thing here. Cannot be ignited while at maximum endurance charges. It is not ideal for the endgame version because we actually do lose quite a bit of damage. It's 39% of fizz damage as extra damage of a random element while you are ignited. So, okay, I have to nerf my build a little bit. Are you ignited? No. Right, so yeah, it is a nerf. It makes the build a bit worse, but you can run and play it. Because if you don't have this, you ignite yourself, you die. So you can't play. So this allows you to play. And how do we get maximum endurance charges? Well, we use a combination of very cheap jewels, fragility, -1 maximum endurance charge. We get 2 of those. And then either on a ring or an amulet, we craft +1 minimum endurance charge. Right, so we have 3 maximum by default, we cut 2 down, so we have 1 maximum, and then we get +1 minimum, so we're always at 1, and 1 is maximum, which means that we're always immune to Ignite. And that's how you solve the Ignite. Early on, super budget. Yeah, and it works. The build works. It's scuffed, but slowly, you know, step by step, you can juice it up and make it good. And then do damage, and of course upgrade gear and stuff. And it's gonna be great. Yeah, levels and stuff. Yep. Yep. That's about it for me. I will be making a League Starter video, but not on this. This is, I don't think I should be putting people on a copium that this is League Start friendly, because it's really not. It's gonna suck. It's just gonna suck. Okay, it's gonna suck because low AoE, low damage, low survivability. Like, nothing about this build is amazing. It works though. It's still fast, 259 movement speed with, you know, this scuffness. So technically, you could transition very early with just a few Exiles investment, or, well, a few Divines investment now. It's a bit silly, but whatever. Look forward to a League Starter video if you are curious about that. It's probably going to be Armageddon brand. I'm really high on Copium that is going to be good, because I played it in the Gauntlet, and it felt great, and I'm making that hardcore, low damage, defensive build into a more softcore, but still relatively defensive with more damage and more speed and stuff like that. Divine Blessing, Haste. Oh, the new buffed Haste. Oh. Anyway, all right. Catch you in the next one. Bye.